Hello, Klaus Leopold is my name. Well, no, I'm Florian, and I'll be guiding you through today's evening, providing the framework for Klaus, if you like. So, first of all, welcome to Telekom. I know not everybody here works at Telekom, and that's a good thing, because this is a community event. The Agile community in Cologne-Bonn, by the Agile community in Cologne-Bonn. We've often benefited from the community. We have gained a lot of knowledge and contacts, and community always means give and take. So we are giving tonight. So we are hosting this event for you tonight. What else? Well, organizational issues. First of all, you've seen that we had access controls. That was necessary. It's important, as I've learned. Outside, there's food and beverages. Hopefully you found the toilets as well. Otherwise, you just go out and to your left. So eating and drinking only outside, please. Now, just on the sequence of things, after my introduction, we'll have a brief check-in. We've come up with something for this about your expectations. And then Laurent will be saying a little bit about why this topic is important, business agility. And then Klaus is up. And his presentation will last about an hour, interrupted by several breaks where in small groups we'll be reflecting upon what we've heard. Then there'll be a Q&A. And at the end, we want to do some networking. And outside, there'll be some catering to help with that. So you don't need to leave right away once the presentation is over. Klaus Leopold. Why Klaus Leopold? Well, for me and my colleague Lukas. Where are you, Lukas? Oh, he's at the back there. He's standing up. Yep, that's him. So this is a dream come true, really, for us, because in 2016, we were at one of Klaus Leopold's Kanban training sessions in Frankfurt, and we were really pumped after the training, and we said, yes, sometime we need to get Klaus Leopold to come and speak on stage, and now that dream has come true. So I don't know what else I'm going to do. That's my life's goal already achieved. So we have been in contact with Klaus every year since then, really, at different conferences, at different training sessions, in whatever format. So we're pretty much friends with him now. And he's actually going to be doing a flight level training at Telekom, and 20 people will be participating in that. And of course, that fits very nicely with our topic today. I hope that you'll be tweeting. This is the hashtag for tonight's event. So Klaus meets Magenta. It's on your wristband too, and as you can see, it's up here. So before Laurent comes up on stage, the check-in, how we're going to proceed. Well, the idea is that you talk to each other. Oh no. Hopefully I'll be sitting next to someone that I already know, I'm sure you're thinking. But you can also talk to anyone that you like, perhaps someone that you don't know. The idea, basically, is that for 2 minutes, and you have to keep things brief, therefore, you answer these 2 questions. Why are you here today rather than going home and enjoying your evening off? And are you here with a specific question or challenge? And if so, what? So you know what you have to do? Talk. You're wonderful. It's working perfectly. So I hope that you listened carefully. Oh, listening. That's important too, because the idea now is to you now put into Menti what you understood from your interlocutor. So here you've got the code menti.com. Call that up with your smartphone and you enter the number displayed here, and it's then important that you enter in what your partner said. Keep things brief though. Perhaps we'll make it to 400 and then we'll leave it there. So you can see that curiosity, inspiration, networking, I think we can meet those requirements. I think you're at the right event for those things, so that's good. Great. Okay, we'll keep that going for another couple of minutes and then we'll wrap things up and we'll tell you the results later on. So that's it from me for the moment. Now, Laurent will be coming up to tell you why it's important to listen to the presentation tonight. Good evening. I'm Laurent Donnet. In Telekom, I work in IT, responsible for agile enterprise transformation. But specifically tonight, I'm the last person standing between you and Klaus, so I'll try and keep things brief. So, you're pretty good at raising your hands, I've noticed. So, who in the audience is not from Telekom tonight? Great. So let's just take a couple of minutes' time. At Telekom, agility is a topic that has been around for quite some time now. The first approaches started in 2008 at Telekom. So the journey started a long time ago for us. And we've come quite a long way in several respects. Now, if you look at the share of the budget that is delivered agilely, these are the KPIs that companies like, then currently we're looking at 60%. And last year it was 40%. And I think everyone here tonight knows that these figures come about because someone in a project in their calendar, for instance, have a daily note in their account. It happens by telephone, lasts a week, and then they say, okay, great, we're agile now. But there's another KPI that I'd like to share with you, which is time to market. Last year, in 2018, time to market at Telekom IT was over 10 months on average between the idea and the implementation for the final customer. This year, we're already at 8 months, so we've already reduced it by 2 months. That's the average figure. I'd like to give you one last example for what agile means for Telekom, for those of you who aren't from Telekom. In November, our e-commerce platform is being launched. Code name is Magenta House. And it's an entire e-commerce platform linked to the infrastructure so that every Deutsche Telekom customer can get a fixed line, for instance. It's very complex, and that's going live in November. The team is actually ready to go live with this in 2 weeks if necessary, and it's already being piloted. And that's the current status of technology at Telekom today. And I think we can be very proud of this, because if you take a look at these projects, and there's not just one of them, there's several of them. I could give you 10 different examples. These pioneers at Telekom are about 10 to 20% of our people, of our budget. And the question that we are asking ourselves is, how can we take these pioneers and make them the standard for all our employees in IT and also in the other departments? And that's the question that I'm asking myself today for this presentation. Now, we heard the key term learning in the introductory remarks, and I'm sure that tonight we'll learn an awful lot. Klaus Leopold, a huge round of applause, please, for Klaus Leopold, who will be taking us on his journey this evening.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. Well, here we are. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. It's really great that I got the opportunity to talk to you this evening. So what will I be talking about? The title of my presentation is Rethinking Agile. Why Agile teams have nothing to do with business agility. That's the subtitle, if you will. And this is what I'm going to talk about tonight. Here we are. All right. So you can see that I'm already assimilating to the corporate culture here. What I want to do tonight is to tell you a story that's based on true facts. That's what people say in the movies, right? And the story that I'm going to share with you tonight is about what an organization did in order to become agile, and not everything worked out according to their plans. Now, what is the problem? Let's start with that. The organization that I'm talking about had a problem, which is good. I mean, it's not great, but very often people want to become agile because others do it, so they want to do it too. But this company had a sense of urgency. They wanted to do something about this problem. What was the problem? Time to market was good, but not good enough. It took them forever to get a project to market, so they wanted to deal with this problem. Now, time to market of projects, this sounds very sterile, but actually it's something very specific. Let's say you're in a market, your company's in a market where you don't have the monopoly. So there's competitors, they're also in the same market, and those competitors are faster than you are. They're younger, more dynamic, and they're just better than you are. So you're afraid that you will lose out to the competition. Also, exploit opportunities. The organization had identified opportunities, but by the time they came to market with their solution, it was too late. And last but not least, we all know what continuous change is all about. We're all familiar with artificial intelligence, chatbots. We don't do projects anymore, we do products, and it's not really products, we need solutions, Things are going on, things are constantly changing, and this organization said, if we continue with business as usual, then, we won't make it. The future will happen, but we won't be there. So they said, we have to change, we have to really rethink the way we work. And what do you do today when you're in such a position? You become agile, right? So you want more agility. Agility solves all your problems at once. This is awesome, this is great. Now, the company, thought, let's do an agile transformation. And I think there's a technological glitch, but as I said, I'm always calm. Here we go. So let's do an agile transformation. Now, what does that mean? They said, first of all, we need cross-functional teams. We are part of an agile community. We know what cross-functional teams are, right? You all know what it is? Yes, I see you're nodding your heads. That's good. So we want cross-functional teams, as much know-how as possible within one team, so that this team can deliver faster without being dependent on anyone else. So they took it a step further. They said we need product teams, cross-functional product teams. What does that mean? It means one team works on one product. That's a sensation, right? It's awesome. If you manage to do that, that would be perfect. So the idea is to take down barriers, you do away with obstacles, and you can deliver straight to market without any obstacles. Then we also said, let's not be too dogmatic about agile methods. The teams, they can choose their agile method themselves. They can choose the method they want to work with. They just have to respect a number of minimum requirements. First of all, every team in this agile transformation needs to have a board. Do you know what a board is, right? Visualization, it's a buzzword nowadays. So we want to make sure that the work that's being done is visual, that we can see what the team is working on, what the problems are. So all teams need to have a board. In addition to that, stand-up meetings. I think you also know what that is. You're all familiar with it. Very short meeting, 10 to 15 minutes, once per day, where the team decides what to do on the day in question. So it's a required stand-up meeting every day. And to do retrospectives. We also know what that is. It's meetings designed to improve things. We want to continuously learn, continuously improve, and this is why we do retrospectives. Right? So that's what we said. One last thing, I think this is really charming. They said, we need to measure some indicators. We don't just want to say, this feels good to be agile, it feels more agile. We want to see what the numbers say. So every team had to measure two things. So first of all, about how much is delivered, and then how fast they can deliver. So throughput and lead time, throughput or velocity and lead time. These are the two measurements that every team needs to do. Now, if you look at this, looking at the slide, everyone who read a textbook on agility will say, awesome, right? They knew what agility is all about. They understood the concept. This is what you need to do in order to become agile. What can go wrong? So that's what they did. They started on their journey. What was the first thing they did? The first thing was that they set up a transformation project that was set to last 18 months. Are you feeling anything? That's my type of humor, You say you want to become agile, and then you define a timeline of, let's design a graph of how we become agile, and let's do it in 1 year and a half. I don't know. If you want to bring about change, if you want to become more agile, then the change process itself needs to be agile. But that's not what they did. They came up with this plan. All right, now what did they write in this plan? It was about 600 people, and they received basic agile training, basic training about agility. You might have heard it before. Agility is not about, agile practices. Agility is about having the right mindset. It's about an agile mindset. That's what you need in our organization. That's what we need, because agility is all about the mindset, and the mindset is decisive for the success of the strategy. So you have 600 people, and they get a one-day agile mindset training, right? So that's what happened. And then you can, check the box and say, yes, agile mindset, we're all set. Well, of course, you could think about whether this will actually work, but that was their approach. That's what they did. Then reorganization, cross-functional product teams inspired by the Spotify model. Who's familiar with that, Spotify? Yes. It's cool to say team, tribe, squad, you just talk about all these names. So reorganization, you throw everyone into the air, and then all your staff, they just land in their new cross-functional teams, and this is where they start their agile work. Now, agile was then implemented team by team. Like the Scrum teams got their Scrum trainings, Scrum masters, product owners, Kanban teams, and I wasn't there. They, their things. And it was, a team by team approach, and team after team became agile. It was all initiated by 16 external coaches, which is great if you come to think about it. If you're a consulting company, it's awesome. You can place 16 of your coaches. Yeah, you can invoice them for quite an amount. But if you look at the program, it is really very ambitious. 600 people with 16 external coaches. You have this agile mindset training, 600 people. If you say you want to have groups of 20, then, it will take you 1 or 2 days. And then the Scrum Masters, that takes 2 days, product owners, etc., etc. So that's a lot of training days. And of course, they will need initial support. They don't know what a stand-up meeting is, right? You have to teach them. So, yeah, great business for the consulting company. What else did they do? And this was actually smart thing to do. They also established internal coaches. So they trained 11 internal agile coaches, which is great because usually you have external people coming in and everything works more or less. But once those external coaches have gone, everyone just relaxes and thinks, oh, thank God we can go back to business as usual. So if you really invest that amount of money, you don't want your staff to go back to business as usual ever again. Of course, you want this to be sustainable, right? So this is what they had planned. Now, after a year, they found that 80% of all teams were fully transformed. That's how they put it, fully transformed. 80% of their teams after 1 year. But what does that mean? It means that they can check a lot of boxes. They were able to check all of them. They do stand-ups, check retrospectives, checks. We saw a board there, so check. Metrics, yes. Metrics. Now, what is this about? So maybe we should look at those metrics, right? I mean, if you do them, you should look at what they say. So what has been achieved, what has been accomplished after 1 year? And this is where it gets interesting, because this shows you what the outcome is. So I have a couple of metrics in my slides. Let's look at this. All these are trend charts. So this is not just about one team. This is the trend for all teams so that, you can see how things are going in general. This is a Scrum velocity chart. Scrum velocity, who knows what it's about? It's pretty much throughput, How much can one Scrum team deliver? Or how much do they deliver? Here on the x-axis you see time, and on the y-axis you can see the story points, Scrum story points, if you will. So the chart tells you how velocity develops over time. Now the result that you'd expect is something like this, right? At the beginning, you don't have a lot of velocity. It's something new. People have to find their place in the new team, but then there will be an exponential increase, and then after a while the curve will become a bit less steep, but still a continuous improvement. This is the expectation, right? Now, what happened? Something like this. So, well, yes, at the beginning it wasn't too good, but then it goes up and it goes down again. So what's that about? So we said, this is mysterious. What happened? We thought it would improve. Why didn't it? That's when first people started saying, well, Scrum, we always said it couldn't work. Kanban would work way better than this. But I also have a Kanban lead time metric. It's also a throughput chart, a trend with several teams. Here we can see trend and lead time. How fast can we deliver? The result you'd expect would be something like this. This is the bare minimum of what you can expect, right? I mean, if you read any of the case studies, this is the minimum that you'd expect, to cut lead time in half. Some say that you can be 10 times faster than you used to be. 10 times faster, all that is possible, and you can at least cut your lead time in half. So that's what you'd expect. The result was this. So it, got a little bit worse, but nothing much changed really. So people thought about it again. What's going on here? And now you have to be careful here, because what we see in this chart is these are all team charts, right? So before this agile transformation, those teams didn't even exist. Those cross-functional product teams didn't exist before the transformation. So we can't really compare these values to anything from before. But there was one metric that had always existed in the organization. They looked at time to market for projects, or initiatives as they were now called. So this is really the reason why they started this whole transformation. Before they were working on initiatives, and now they were still working on initiatives. And this is the trend where they found, things have to change because things can't stay like they are. So this is where agile transformation started, and this is what you'd expect. Right? The result was more like this. So this is where it starts to hurt. Because, you invest all this money into this agile transformation and things become worse. So things are agile, but it still takes longer. It takes teams longer to finish initiatives, to deliver them. And then people started asking, what is going on here? This can't be true. And this is when my phone started ringing and people were asking me about it. And someone, told me the whole story I just shared with you. So this is when I came in. And I knew just as much about the problem as you know now. The caller told me, I heard all these rumors and things are not improving. Maybe you can come to our company and look at it and tell us what's wrong. So back then I didn't know anything else but what I just shared with you. So I thought about hypotheses, what could it be? And this is the first task I have for you. What do you think is a problem? Let's have a quick reflection. We don't know what the problem is, right? All you can do is develop ideas. So what do you think that the problems are? So turn to your neighbor, the person sitting next to you. You have 2 minutes and we'll start the clock. What do you think? Quick reflection.
Oh, works wonderfully. Okay, so there should be some microphones going around the room. So I'd just like to collect a few ideas from the audience as to what you came up with, what you thought the problem might be. Who would like to contribute at the back? So how can we get the dice microphone to you? Throw it over there. Great. Hello. My name's Ollie from the technical department. I think that the problem is the workflow. There are different steps that you have to go through to implement a project, and all of a sudden there are dependencies. Some kind of outsourcing or interface with another team. You have to hand it over to another team. They have to do something for me, and then at some point it comes back to me, and I just have to wait. I'm just sitting around until that happens, and I don't have anything to do, and then everything takes longer. That's right. Yeah. Although I'm agile, I still have to wait for a certain amount of time. Any other hypotheses? Rainer Miete, also from the technical department. Well, there are a lot of different processes that you have to deal with. Development is just one part of it, and I don't know whether the other departments are agile or not. Probably they were just as slow as before, and that's the outcome. Good point. Very good. Any other hypotheses? Hi, Martin from Post. From Deutsche Post. I think because we introduced agile methods, that doesn't necessarily mean that people really wanted to reduce lead times. People were engaged in training, they couldn't take part in the project, so it took longer. Good point. Yeah, it needs a certain amount of time for things to really take effect. I think someone else was raising their arm, asking to take the floor. Ooh, I'd like to see you try and make that throw. Hi, Roland from Magenta House. I think perhaps the problem was that the kind of cargo pool, that people got new terms for things, but actually they did everything as before. And then ultimately there's a certain amount of communication overhead. Okay, yeah. Then I think there was one more person requesting to take the floor. Okay, we've got 2 more hands that I see. Hi. Falk, not from Telekom. You can work as agilely as you want to, but you have to make sure that you're not doing too much. Too much. Ah, very good point. Falk, would you like to throw the dice somewhere over here? Christina from International Delivery. My idea was that agility has to be introduced, or perhaps it was introduced as an organizational structure rather than a mindset. And then the idea of getting rid of barriers, perhaps processes stayed the same. Very good, very nice, thank you. One more, seeing as you're right next to it. Felix, also from Deutsche Post. Hi, Martin. If you agilize processes, it doesn't help if you still try and do too much. You have to get to a level where people decide how much work is put in the pipeline. You have to try and thin that out. Yes, that goes in the direction of what Falk said. Very good. That's a lot of interesting points there that were indeed true in this case. Very good. So at that point in time, you can only come up with hypotheses as to what the problem might have been. So they invited me to come and take a look at their business for about 1.5 days, and we started chatting, basically looking at what the causes might be, what the actual problem might be. And the nice thing in this organization was that every team had a board. So agility was a matter for the team. So every team had a board. So it was very easy to go to the team and have a discussion with them on what their working methods were. And that's what I did. Now, the first thing, and I think we've mentioned this already, the first thing I took a closer look at was dependencies, agile interactions, what the situation was. This is a simplified team board here. In reality, it was a little bit different, but if you reduce it down to the essentials, this is what it looked like. You have your backlog, all the things you're working on, then next, what do we want to do next? Develop, and then done. Scrum teams, same pattern. The titles were slightly different. They were talking about product backlog, then it was a sprint backlog, then we were in the sprint, and then we're finished. That's it, basically. Now, what I noticed was that for each team, there was something like this. Do you know this kind of thing? Is this familiar to you? External waiting. So this team can't make any progress because somewhere out there in the universe, there's another team in that organization, and they're waiting for that team to supply them with something. And it wasn't always visualized in this way, but this visualization did exist everywhere. And I started asking the teams what or who they were waiting for. And they told me, which was good. Now, if you think about what's actually going on here, if you have this external waiting going on, if every team in this organization has a board, then that means somewhere else there has to be a second team which also has a visualization with this kind of board. Now, if at the top they're blocked, then that means that team 2 has got an order that comes into the backlog. There's a planning and voodoo magic phase, and at some point they start working, and then it goes to done, and then once it's done in that team, then it goes back to the first team, and then they can continue. So I asked people, well, who are you waiting for in the organization? And I started to map the dependencies, and this is what it looked like. So we're waiting a little bit for each other. The question is, though, why in this organization are there so many dependencies? Because we did everything actually to eliminate dependencies. They did cross-functional teams, even product teams. You know, imagine that is a huge achievement to have cross-functional product teams in place. And nonetheless, there are so many dependencies. that image. So 3 main points that I identified. Yes, they have product teams. So one team works on just one product. So far, so good. But several teams are working on the same product. So if this team at the top right is working on product 1, but the teams below are also working on product 1, then of course there's going to be dependencies. What else? The products weren't completely independent. Probably be familiar with that too. If you change something in this product, then you have to change it in other products too. So there were dependencies among the products as well. And we're talking about 600 people here. Personally, I haven't seen a single organization with more than 30 people that don't have dependencies. So it's no wonder that these kinds of dependencies exist. In reality, dependency charts actually look like this. This is a dependency diagram of a South African financial service provider. And the exciting thing here is that the post-it here in the middle, these are the dependencies from this cross-functional product team, only from this one single team, so not the entire organization, just this one team. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Now, each time I think about dependencies, then I always have this picture that comes into my mind, a picture of a keyboard. So let's assume our organization is a keyboard and we're in the writing business. So we write letters or whatever to our customers. So let's structure our organization. Here are the teams. Team 1, 2, 3, 4. Team 1 presses the figures, team 2 the next row, and so on and so forth. Now the customer comes and says, "I'd like a love letter, please." Okay, we have to think about how we deliver that love letter. In a world with 600 people, then we don't have 4 teams. In fact, our organization would look like this. For every single button on our keyboard, you have a team that's responsible for pressing the key. You've got an R team and so on and so forth. And now we have to optimize our teams. That's what we're going to do. So let's assume it works. So let's assume it really works. We've got the best teams in the whole world. We've got the best V team, the best B team, the best G team. When they start to press the G key, then sparks fly. We're an international benchmark in pressing those keys. But how much faster is our letter actually going to be finished? Well, not that much faster. Not really. Because the point is, the keyboard is a nice example for dependencies. Because if I'm pressing the different keys, it doesn't matter how quickly I press the individual keys. It's more important that I press the right button at the right time. So it could be a bit slower. As long as I'm pressing the right key at the right time, then I have gained in performance. Same applies to organizations. It's not so important that every team is super high performing. High performing teams is a concept that I don't really understand. As an organization, we have to make far more sure that the right team is working on the right thing at the right time. That is where you get performance, that the right team is working on the right thing at the right time. They can take their time. And there's someone called Russell Eckhoff who already said this. He said the performance of the whole is never the sum of the parts taken separately. It's the product of their interactions. So if you divide up an organization into its parts, then at some point you're going to get to the teams. So if you've optimized the teams, then you're optimizing the individual parts. But Eckhoff said that's not going to lead to a better performance in the system. What you have to do is optimize the interactions first and foremost. So if you transport that into today's agility age, then you could say that agility doesn't mean that you have agile teams. if you look at the organizational level, if you have agility there, then what you need is to have agile interactions between the teams. I need agile interactions between the teams. That is something that hadn't happened at this organization. This organization had said cross-functional teams. We need to get rid of the functional silos that are in place. We need cross-functional teams, and that will do the business. I'm a fan of cross-functional teams, just to be clear on that. They're really great. But you mustn't forget, yes, this organization did get rid of the organizational silos, but what they did is set up new cross-functional silos. So it's not so relevant how the teams are composed. It's much more important to get rid of the walls between the teams. And this is something that hadn't happened at that organization at the time. That's what I would subsume under the topic of there being no agile interactions between the teams. That was my finding number one, problem number one that I identified. I want to stay in problem mode for the moment. There are two more problems that I've brought with me, and then after that I will switch into solution mode. So problem number one. Problem numero two was the flow. I talked to the teams a little bit about how they work. And I challenged their workflow. What does that mean? Well, here we've got our simplified team board once again. What I did was I took a look at the different steps and thought about, is that really everything? And the question was, okay, you develop, and once you're finished with development, then it's done. And the customer says, great, that's what I wanted. They said, well, not really. It's not as simple as that. Well, once we're finished with development, then we do need to integrate. Okay, fair enough. Okay, we could put that on the board too. So then we added a column. Integration would be good too. And that's why we actually have these boards in the first place, to see what's happening. So after integration, then the customer's happy, it's done. Not entirely. After integration, we do need to have acceptance. Okay, let's add that too. That's why the boards are there. Good. So now we're waiting for acceptance. But then the customer has said, okay, they're very happy. So customer, happy. Good. So, actually, no, it's not quite that straightforward. After acceptance, we do then, of course, have to release it. There's a release window. And then at some point, it's done. Okay, it's good to have this information. And that's why we have these boards. I want to know exactly these kinds of details. And the nice thing is that once you have that information up on the board, I can ask further questions then, which I did. So then I asked, how often does this happen? And this was the answer. Once a month, you have the integration, acceptance, tests, and release. That happens quarterly. We want to improve the time to market of our initiatives. So I have let's pretend we have an idea that I've developed. I wasn't happy with this yet. And I said, what about prior to this whole process? So you've got your backlog, and you've got this great idea in the pipeline. Okay, then you get started. No, it's not as simple as that. That's the development backlog we're talking about here. Before we start developing, of course, we first of all have to analyze. Okay, so we've got a product backlog, then we've got the analysis, then we come to the development backlog. But before the product backlog, okay, yeah, you've got your cool idea under that, right? The answer was, no, give me the pen, we'll write down how the process really looks. This was the result. So we've got a pool of new ideas. Then we do an initial triage. So just like in the emergency room, and then we'll write a rough business concept for the idea. Then that waits for the steering committee. Then we write a detailed concept of our ideas that also has to be accepted and approved. Then we come to the product backlog. So if you zoom out a little bit, then the process actually looks like this. So a little bit broader than first thought. And the nice thing is, I love these boards because once again I can ask, and how often does this actually happen? This was the answer. Monthly. We have the triage. That's pretty quick, isn't it? If you take a look at the rest of it. Quarterly, the steering committee meets to judge the rough concepts, and then once a year, the detailed concepts are approved or not with the yearly budget. Okay, well, I'm trying to improve the time to market of initiatives. Perhaps you have any idea where we might possibly make a change? Some kind of vague idea? They had an idea too, they said. Development. Problem identified. Okay, we'll just sprinkle a little bit of agile fairy dust here, and then we'll be the most agile team on the planet. No, I don't think so. The nice thing is that if we think about when work actually takes place, then things get really interesting. These are the points. So there are some outliers where people are working, but most of the time, no one's working in this system. And I think this is an important point. You know, if we set up these boards, how do we set them up? Because usually they say who is working when, but that's not very interesting because most of the time people aren't working. People are busy, but I need to see where the work is getting stuck in the system, where no one's actually working on it, because if we can get rid of those periods, then it's amazing how much you can improve your performance. You know, here you can do all you want, but if everything is in the backlog for years before that, then it doesn't make any difference. I'm not going to say it doesn't make any difference to make development more agile. Okay, software development, for instance, that can make a difference. But when it comes to business agility, that has nothing to do with business agility. This organization is just as slow on the market as before. It hasn't moved a single millimeter as a result of the efforts here. And that was my second major finding in this organization. It was a very local optimization without the big picture in mind and no end-to-end management of the value stream. They just added a bit of agility here and thought everything else would be good. And of course, that didn't work. Number 2. So I have one more finding, and then we'll move on to the solutions.
So I mentioned the strategic portfolio. Strategic portfolio, agile strategic portfolio management. You might have heard it before. Let me take a step back first so that you understand the point I'm trying to make here. Let's go back to the team and the team board. So they did a lot of visualizing, and you know, they were agile at a team level, and they had figures like this on the columns. Can you see them? Do you know what the numbers mean? Work in progress limits, WIP limits. So the number of parallel projects was limited because they said, you know, we just want to focus on this or that. We want to deliver one thing before we start working on the other one. This is great, right? Those WIP limits are great. You can build focus. Scrum teams do it. Kanban does it as well. Scrum doesn't use WIP limits. They use the time box sprint, right? So a Scrum team, in their world, this would be a 3 weeks sprint. So they commit to deliver something within those 3 weeks, and nothing else will be added to their plate throughout those 3 weeks. So they have a WIP for those 3 weeks, the sprint. It's a similar concept. Now, why do I speak about focusing or creating focus if I want to tell you what the solution is? WIP limits are really the best thing that humanity has ever invented because it helps us so much. We can achieve a lot of things. Go to Florian and Lucas when they tell you about Kanban, they will also tell you about this. WIP limits are great. You know, you can reduce switching overhead. You can reduce cost of delay. You can be more predictable in your delivery times. You can deliver with lower risks. It's great. A lot of great things can be accomplished. We can also reduce our time to market. In a WIP limited system, you are automatically faster. And you don't have to believe in it. We actually have the mathematic proof, Little's law. It shows you that this is correct. And you know, when you can really prove something arithmetically, then this is great. Because it's just like gravity. You don't have to believe in it. You know, it just happens. And I'm back. You know, I can't escape it. You can't escape it. And the same is true for WIP limits. You can prove it mathematically that it will make you faster. Now, they became slower. So what actually happened in this organization? It's not that they proved the theory wrong. When we talk about WIP limits, then sometimes we lose sight of the small print. So this is why I made it bigger. You can't just limit anything, any unit in the organization. You have to focus on those work items where you want to achieve the benefits. This is what you want to do. You know, not just focus on just anything, you have to focus on where you want to see the benefit. Now, what did it mean for this organization? They had worked on initiatives, right? An initiative is a big part, so they divided it up into epics, into stories, and into tasks. Right? You're probably familiar with that. And agility didn't come up with this idea. You know, you might have worked in projects and sub-projects and tasks. You always have a bigger thing, and then you break it down into the smaller details. So you want to reduce time to market for initiatives. Now, what do you need to focus on? What do you need to limit? Initiatives, right? So agility, if you think about it on the team level only, then what do you have access to in this chain? Tasks, stories, yes. This is your world as a team. So you can already see where the problem starts. We shouldn't be surprised when you don't see any improvement if you focus on the wrong elements, right? And this is what happened in this organization. The teams, you know, they had their limits, and they fought them tooth and nail, which isn't easy. You know, they stuck to those limits. They really defended them. They limited stories and tasks, but still they were working on 1,000 initiatives all at once, and they didn't get any faster at finishing or completing any one of these initiatives. Now, you always have to think about this. Where can you focus on initiatives in the organization? Who can do that? Someone up there, right? It's always someone up there. So the portfolio is strategic portfolio. These are where the initiatives are located, and this is where things need to change. And it didn't happen in this organization. Agility is a team sport. Of course, somewhere they had an Excel list with a list of projects, etc. But there was no agile strategic portfolio management. No one was really looking at that in this organization. So these were the three problems that I identified. No agile interactions between the teams, no agile strategic portfolio management, and no end-to-end management of the value stream. Now, let's have another 2-minute break. Well, not a break, really. It's a quick reflection. So think about this question. Try to talk to someone else now, not the same person that you talked to before. and discuss this question here. You have 2 minutes. Go. All right. So let's go back to our dice mic. What did you discuss? Did any of the problems look familiar? Yes? Hi, Marcus from Cannes GmbH. Something I'm very familiar with is that it doesn't mean a lot to have agile teams if you don't, change the products, like domain design and the dependencies between the teams. Who else? All right, 2 more arms were raised. 3. You're so far away, so maybe I'll just make the save throw? No? Niels Jansen, AUK Systems. It's also great when the guys up there, they hear about new technologies and they say, let's do it. And then they just throw it at you, although, the framework isn't right for you to actually achieve anything. I think the most fascinating phenomenon is when you talk to CEOs or managers about it and do a simulation, and they say, yes, I understood it, I got it, I do this and this means that this and that will happen, this is great. And then they leave through the door and they just forget everything you told them, and they start thinking. Great. Attila from Cologne. I think Falk doesn't work in our company because I think technology is agile. Moritz, my name, from Telekom. Quality wasn't mentioned, or hasn't been mentioned yet. So we deliver, but what is the quality of the products we deliver, or the initiatives? And very often you just have to deliver something, because there's a deadline, and then, no one's really responsible for the quality of what you deliver. Yeah, great quality hadn't been mentioned before, and other topics haven't been mentioned either, but, of course, our time is limited. Outcome versus output is also interesting. Yeah, so thanks for that. So from Telekom IT, applications really manifest in departments. So very often you don't know who you develop something for, and we don't have any idea of what the value stream is about. Thank you. So it's not... it is something that you're familiar with. It is something you've seen before. This is the conclusion I draw. That is good. You know what I'm talking about. So we're on the same page here. Of course, I have to look at the time. Not too much time is left, but let's now focus on solutions. We've been talking about problems for too long. But of course, we can't go into a lot of depth. It would be a 2-day flight levels training. That's when we could look at all the details. We just have 10 minutes. I'll give you an overview. So what are our possible solutions? First of all, let's talk about agile interactions between teams. How can we make sure that those interactions become more agile? Or what did we do in this organization? You remember that the problem was this. There were so many dependencies between the teams. And the very first step, what we did first, was that we zoomed out of the team level. And we built product boards. Because the dependencies were, there were product teams. One team works on one product, but there's also several teams that work on the same product. So if those 3 teams work on the same product, we zoomed out away from the team level and said, the 3 teams here work on the same product. So we just locked them into one room for a day and asked them to draw a board that shows how they work together on this product. And we did that with all the products. So this is decisive. We shouldn't optimize organizational units. For me as a customer, the organizational unit doesn't matter. I'm interested in the value that's delivered at the end. So this is what should be agilized. We should agilize what the customer is interested in. I'm a Netflix customer. I have a Netflix account. What do I want? See a movie, right? Maybe a lot of movies, maybe good movies. I can add some adjectives here, but what you do is you want to see a movie. Now, if Netflix tells you, we have tribes and squad and cross functionality, why do they tell me, I'm not interested in that. I'm really not interested. And it's the same for our customers. We have to focus on what's valuable to the customer. Now, the product boards, whenever we build them, we have to, identify the right people and look at dependencies. And the board itself won't solve any of your problems. No framework, no method, no methodology, no board will solve a problem. Who solves problems is people. And this is what agile interactions are all about. So you need to establish agile interactions. So the right people need to be standing in front of the board and discussing the problems. So we came up with 2 additional feedback loops: agile interactions, stand-up meetings, of course, product stand-ups, and product retrospectives. So the teams kept doing their stand-ups, but then we zoomed out and did an additional stand-up at the product level. So a stand-up meeting could have 200 people. Of course, not 200 people are standing in front of a board. This wouldn't work. Everyone would be losing time. And we worked with delegates. Every team sent a delegate to the stand-up meeting. The stand-up meeting happened. And once it's done, everyone, all the delegates, the representatives, go back into their teams and do their stand-up meeting. So we made sure that everyone had all the information. Retrospectives, we did the same thing. It's really fascinating sometimes, in agile organizations, all the teams do retrospectives. But very rarely do they actually learn from the retrospectives of the other team. So you have a lot of isolated retrospectives. And we wanted to zoom out once more. And now the retrospectives were not about how an individual team worked. We put the product at the center and did a product retrospective. How can we deliver a better product to the customer? Of course, we kept the retrospectives at the team level, but we added this additional layer, product retrospectives. Now, in doing so, we can make sure that dependencies that are not managed are reduced. So you'll always have dependencies. You still have the same dependencies here, but you can reduce or you can add agile interactions and thereby manage dependencies, address them twice a week. Of course, you're still left with some dependencies between the products. So if you change something about product A, you also need to change the detail about product B and C. So what did we do about that? I think this is how we could put it. We established operational portfolio management. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, operational portfolio management, but that's what I'd call it today. This means, this is what we really did, and then we invented the word. So we identified dependencies between different products. And then for those dependencies, we either build a new board. Now it says product A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And then we can see what the dependencies are between the products and we can manage them. Very often we didn't even come up with a new board. We already had those product boards. And then we just, put them all together. And then, you have an overview of all the dependencies. But this is even more important, agile interactions. Agile interactions between the teams can help reduce those dependencies. So portfolio stand-ups, portfolio retrospectives. So the different products send delegates to the portfolio level stand-up and retrospective. And once again, you can really get a hold of those dependencies. I'm a big fan of cross-functional teams. I'm also a big fan of product teams. However, we can't just, believe that we'll ever find an organization where there are no dependencies. You'll always have dependencies. We can talk about cross-functional teams and we can reduce dependencies, but we can't really abolish them. So I try to not say always or never, but I think you can never avoid all dependencies. There will always be some dependencies between teams. So we have to learn how we manage those dependencies. Personally, I'm a big fan of, first developing this capability in a company. First, you manage dependencies, and then you can reorganize and reduce the number of dependencies. That's just my personal approach. But, the ability to really manage those dependencies helps you. If you have the Spotify model or any other model, you will always have some dependencies. So you have to learn how to manage them. You need to learn how to manage the dependencies that you can't avoid. Then, we said it before, no end-to-end management in the value stream. So what can you do about that? The solution was this, pretty much. We did two things. We brought business on board, and we simplified the upstream. So we no longer have 10,000 steps, we just have a few. So what does it mean to bring business on board? A traditional organization, didn't grow up with the internet, to put it politely, so they didn't grow up with IT. Maybe, that's the best way to put it. So they think, here's the business, and then over there you have IT. IT is a 100% subsidiary of this company, and IT, all they do is causes costs. They're just expensive. They're just a cost factor. It's stupid that we have them, but, the typewriters didn't survive, so yeah. So this is their approach very often in those organizations. And now if I say we brought business on board, then, this took 18 months. So it takes a while to really break up those mental barriers and do away with these obstacles. Because you have to do away with the thinking that, IT is just costing you money and the other teams deliver in order to pay for the IT people. So business actually talked with us and coordinated this, and we also simplified the upstream. Now we had a bi-weekly approval meeting. Before then, we had those annual budgets, and now every 2 weeks, we could start something new. Of course, it's not just about starting new things. Organizations are usually pretty good at it, but they kept the focus because WIP limits apply here. So, only if product A or project A is finished, they can start project B. So all of a sudden, they were faster. Projects were smaller, and this is actually a big lever that you can use. And this takes us back to business agility, Think about business agility in a world of annual budgets. And now it's the time of the year when you start worrying about it. I know that. So some of you might be smack in the middle of it. And you think about, what you want to achieve next year, all the projects that you want to start. And of course, you don't start today. You've started a while ago. And then you have an annual budget. For 1 year, you know what projects you want to work on, what projects you have to work on. And then we talk to the teams and say, you know, you have to do the stand-up meeting, you have to do this and that. And yes, you can do that, but it won't work, you know, it won't get you anything. So this is the big lever. If you want to have business agility, then you have to look at the budgeting processes. And this is, of course, nothing that you can do overnight. And it's a difficult thing to accomplish. So boards don't solve anything, people do. So in this case, the business talked to the technical department, the tech guys, and then, of course, using stand-up and retrospectives, they integrated the business side. That was the second part of the solution. And now, last but not least, strategic portfolio management. That was the third problem. And the solution is trivial. It's really pretty simple. You have a portfolio board. We did that in this organization. But the question is, how do you get there? Most of the time, this topic, especially in traditional organizations, you know, it's somewhere on the top management level. And they have to be there at the board, not just as onlookers, but as directly involved, committed stakeholders. And this is new in a lot of organizations. You know, a lot of organizations say, yes, agile, we want to do that, let's do it. You know, we're committed, top management is committed as well. Top management says, we will also become agile. Now go on and do it. That's what they say. You know, it's not about us, it's about the people down there. But it has to do everything with the top management of a company. Because they set the framework. They have to create the framework so that agility can work. And of course, this is something that is not an easy thing to accomplish. It's still, in my experience, simpler to get this commitment from management, to involve management directly. This is easier than what happened in the past, end-to-end management.
So we built a strategic portfolio, and there's a lot of details and there's a lot of information out there on the internet that you can look at. But basically, it's a matter of having the company strategy on board. You know, you need to know what you want, and from that strategy, we develop business metrics as to how we would achieve this. So strategy, world dominance, for instance, business metric, I don't know what that would be. We'll enter the Polish market or whatever. One possibility among many. Okay, a bit tricky in the German context, the example, I know. In other countries, it's easier, not quite so thorny. Okay, we'll conquer Hungary. Not so good as an Austrian. Well, you know what I mean. So we have a strategy, and we try then basically to map this in metrics so that we can see whether we're on the right track or not. So then we thought, how are we going to do this? And this is the board that we came up with. The nice thing is, whenever we launch a work item in the upstream, we do have to come up with a hypothesis as to which business metric will be telling. And when we're looking at a business metric, of course, this relates to the strategy. And this is nice because this allows you to develop strategic alignment in an organization. And the why question is something that employees can then answer. Because, you know, for a lot of employees in a lot of organizations, that's just not possible. A lot of times people don't know why they're working on something other than that it's in the project schedule. But the higher meaning, you know, the strategy, that can be tricky to identify. Often the link is missing between those. So this allows you to bring meaning into employees' work. Yeah, you can get meaning back to the employees and their work, and that is very positive. So we also established feedback loops, stand-up meetings and retrospectives at this level too, and a strategic review. Perhaps just a question. stand-up meetings at the strategic level. What do you think? If I just put this out there, if I'm in a workshop and I say we're going to do a stand-up meeting at the strategy level, if I ask how often do we want to meet, what do you think people say in response to that question? Quarterly, yeah, that's the classic answer, once a quarter. And I say, yeah, that's nice. I have another idea though. How about once a week? And most of the time you have two quite different ideas out there then, and you have to discuss. But I think a weekly meeting is important. It's not the meeting where you define the strategy, it's the meeting where you double check that you're on the right track. And if you're not on the right track, it's not about beating up the employees, it's about coming up with a solution. And perhaps the targets are too ambitious. You need to continuously check where you are and where you have to take action. Good. So we are pretty much at our final destination. I think I'm slightly over already. So these were my 3 problems, as Otto famously said. So if I can summarize these 3 problems, or if I have to summarize them and come up with the quintessence of what I learned by accompanying this organization, then basically I can sum it up like so. And basically, business agility is not a team sport. Business agility is a company sport. You really need to make sure that all the parts of the organization are all on board, and you need to make sure that it's the organization that's moving forward as a whole. That's the important point. So business agility, okay, all the different areas of the organization need to be included. But then the question is, where can you do agility in an organization? That's where we come back to what Florian said in his introduction. I like to use the model here of the flight levels. This helps me to find out where in an organization I need to make which improvement so that I achieve what I want to achieve. Flight levels aren't a method or a framework, it's just a mental model which helps me to analyze where I have to do what in an organization. So flight levels, so it's a concept from aviation. It describes the altitude at which a plane is flying. The higher you fly, if you fly higher, then you see a lot more, but you don't see the details. If you fly very low, then you have a high level of detail, but across a smaller area. And I've tried to apply this metaphor to organizations, and you can fly high and low in organizations too. And it's important. Flying high or low isn't a judgment statement. It's not better necessarily to fly higher or lower. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to fly to New York, then you have to fly higher. If you want to do a short trip to take a look at your neighborhood, then obviously you want to fly lower. So high or low doesn't mean better or worse. You can fly low in an organization. And that brings you to the operational level, the team, the people really out there working at an operational level. You can spread agility at team level. We know all the different models, Scrum, Kanban, design thinking. There are lots of things you can do at team level. But often an organization has more than one team, so there would be several flight level 1 systems in an organization. Often, a team cannot generate 100% of the customer value on its own. So you have to look at the teams as a whole, and you have to go up to flight level 2 to take a look at what's going on here. And usually, hopefully, that would be end-to-end coordination at flight level 2. So that would be your keyboard at flight level 2, and the keys would be flight level 1. Flight level 2 coordinates the different teams working on the right thing at the right time. Flight level 2 and flight level 1 can be connected. And the nice thing about flight level 2 is that it doesn't matter which method the team is using. You know, this whole idea of Kanban being better than Scrum is ridiculous. Nobody at flight level 2 cares about that. I just have to make sure that the right team is working on the right thing at the right time. They can do it with a Scrum, with Kanban, or they could just work. That's all right too. You don't necessarily have to have any method behind it. Often, we have dependencies between the different flight level systems. Flight level 2 is the world of products, customers, segments, projects. Now, if we have several flight level 2 systems, then it looks like this. And if you have dependencies between the products, then we could do something like this to have an operational portfolio. That's what I showed you before. But that's still flight level 2 in my world. And you can coordinate these different dependencies across different products. We can go then to the strategic level. That would be flight level 3 in our organization, the strategic level. The idea here is that all the work in the organization has to be aligned with the strategy. And the strategy has to be operationalized. So level 3, of course, can then be linked to the other levels. In large organizations, there won't just be one flight level 3, there'll be several because there's not just one strategy. For instance, if you're working in different countries or you have different segments in your organization and so on and so forth, then there will be several flight level 3 systems. So that's pretty much the flight levels. And these flight levels help me to find out where I can do what in the organization to achieve what I want to achieve. It's not a matter of worse or best. It's not a question of flight level 1 being better than flight level 3 or vice versa. If teams deliver, then that's all well and good. If you don't have the right strategy in place, then it still doesn't help you, and vice versa. If I have a wonderful strategy and your teams aren't working, then it won't help you with your project times either. So these flight levels help me. The nice thing is that you can start anywhere and then move on to a different flight level as needed. Personally, I would try and start as high up as possible. Whenever I have the possibility, I would start at the highest level, quite simply because that's where you have the biggest lever. If I start at level 1, that's okay too, but you have to just think about the amount of change energy you have to invest at that level to make a change. If you just take the top management, if you can make a fundamental work change here, then you can keep the amount of energy you need quite low, and it has a huge impact on the organization. So start as high as you can would be the heading, the watchword that I like here. So that was pretty much everything that I wanted to say. Thank you.